The horizon was wide as eternity, and the sun leaned heavy upon it like a weary rider. Heat shimmered in waves, bending the distance, making the world seem both endless and unreachable. The earth was cracked in places, scarred in others, like an old man's hands that had worked too long without rest. Wind scraped across the land, carrying dust, carrying memory, carrying silence. It was the kind of silence that did not comfort. It watched, it waited, it weighed down every step. Upon this lonely canvas walked a man, a farmer, though his fields had long since betrayed him. His boots were torn at the seams, the leather softened from years of wear. His shirt, once white, had faded into a shade that could not be named, too tired for gray, too lived in for brown. His back bent slightly, not from age, but from carrying losses no one else could see. He was poor, poorer than most, yet in his poverty there remained something unbroken, an ember that refused to die, even when the world seemed determined to snuff it out. He had lost much: land swallowed by drought, a wife who had grown tired of waiting for harvests that never came, friends who offered pity, never respect, debt collectors who saw him not as a man, but as an empty pocket. And still, he carried on, because carrying on was the only thing left. So when word reached him of a deserted ranch given away for free, he listened. Some said it was cursed, that no man could make the land yield. Others swore the family who owned it had vanished without trace. A place abandoned, bones of a dream left to bleach in the sun. Yet to a man with nothing, a curse was no heavier than hunger. He arrived as the sun slid toward evening. The ranch stood lonely, its fences bent, its house crouched like an old animal too tired to stand. The paint had peeled away, leaving wood exposed and gray as ash. The barn leaned sideways, ribs showing through gaps in the boards. And at the heart of it all stood a well, its stones dark, its mouth yawning wide, as though it had swallowed more than water. The farmer stood there for a long while, his shadow stretching across brittle grass. He felt the weight of stories whispered by others. Families gone, laughter ended, doors slammed shut by something unseen. Yet the air around him was still, waiting, watching. He touched the well's rim with rough fingers. Cool stone against the heat of day. He leaned forward, but saw only blackness, a depth that gave back no reflection. His heart stirred, curiosity, fear, maybe even hope. For in places where nothing grows, a man begins to pray for any secret the earth might hide. The sun dipped lower. Coyotes began their song far off, the kind of music that reminds a man how small he is in the great desert. The farmer set about building a fire with dry wood left behind. The flame cracked, reaching upward, casting shadows that danced across the house's broken windows. He ate little that night. A crust of bread softened in his mouth with careful sips of water from his canteen. His body was tired, but his mind restless. He looked often at the well. Something about it seemed alive, though no sound came from its depths. Lying back against the earth, stars spilled above him, endless and cold. He remembered the years when he had knelt beside barren soil, begging for rain. He remembered the laughter of neighbors who had prospered while he failed. He remembered the silence of an empty house when his wife walked away. But above all, he remembered the feeling that somewhere, somehow, the land still owed him something. Not riches, not glory, just a chance. Sleep came, heavy as stone. And in that sleep, he dreamed. He dreamed of water, a river running deep, cool against his hands, endless in its gift. He dreamed of laughter carried on the wind, of children playing by the well, of a woman's voice singing at dusk. Then came silence, sudden and hollow, as though the world had swallowed all sound. The dream faded, leaving only thirst. When he woke, the fire was nearly out. The night pressed close, thick with unseen eyes. He turned to the well once more. It stood as before, silent, watchful, patient. He whispered into the dark, not knowing why, not knowing to whom. "If there is hope in this land," he said, his voice barely more than breath, "it must come from you." The words hung in the air, unanswered. Yet in the stillness, he thought he heard something, a faint echo, a whisper that was not his own. He closed his eyes, and the desert kept its secrets for now. The mornings at the ranch began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that lingered too long, like an unanswered question. The farmer woke with the sun, rising slow, his bones stiff from the hard ground. He stepped outside, boots crunching over dry earth, and looked upon his new home. It was broken, splintered boards, sagging roof, fences twisted as though they'd been bent by unseen hands. Yet he saw it not only as it was, but as it might become. He carried nails in a tin box, would salvage from what still stood strong, and the steady patience of a man who had already lost everything once before. So he worked. From dawn until dusk, he hammered and lifted, mended and patched. His hands bled, his back screamed, but the ranch began to change piece by piece. A board here, a fence post there. It was not beauty he built, not yet. It was possibility. The soil resisted him at first, cracking under his hoe, dust rising like a laugh at his expense. Still he planted, his faith small but stubborn. He watered with what little he carried, his canteen lighter, each day. And always, his eyes wandered toward the well. The well. It stood like a sentinel, square stones fitted tight, its mouth shadowed, dark as a secret. He told himself it was just a hole in the earth, nothing more. Yet it drew him the way fire draws a moth. At first, he only leaned over listening. No sound came, only the faint hollow of wind brushing stone. But one morning, when he pressed his ear close, he thought he heard something faint, like the soft echo of water dripping far below. That night, he dreamed again. A woman's voice, tender and distant, humming a lullaby. Children's laughter chasing through the yard. A shadow passed, then silence fell heavy as sand. He woke with his heart pounding, the fire beside him reduced to a thread of smoke. The next day, he lowered the bucket. The rope creaked as it unwound, vanishing into darkness. He expected the hollow clunk of wood on stone, or the dry scrape of rope on dust. But when he pulled it back, the bucket was wet. His breath caught. Inside sloshed clear water, cool as mountain snow. He dipped his fingers, raised them to his lips. Sweet, cleaner than anything he had ever tasted. He drank deeply, feeling it run through him, waking something that had long been asleep. From that day on, the well became part of his rhythm. He watered the soil, filled his cup, washed his face. With each drink, strength returned. His crops stirred, sprouting green where before only dust had reigned. He felt as though the land itself had sighed in relief. But with the gift came dreams. Every night, visions grew sharper. The woman's face clearer, her smile soft as dawn. The children's laughter brighter, echoing around him. He saw the family that once called this place home. And always the ending, silence, sudden and cruel, leaving only the black mouth of the well. He told himself they were only dreams. Yet deep inside, he knew the well held more than water. One evening, as the sky blazed orange, a figure approached across the horizon. The farmer's hand went to the small knife at his belt, though it was more habit than defense. The stranger walked slow, carrying no weapon in sight, only a walking stick and a pack slung across his back. When he reached the ranch, he nodded, his face lined with dust and years. His eyes were calm, steady, like a man who had seen much and judged little. "You found the well," he said, voice low and even. The farmer stiffened. "What do you know of it?" The stranger sat on a rock, as if the land itself had invited him. "Enough, that it gives, that it takes, that no gift from the earth is ever free." The farmer frowned, feeling both wary and curious. "It's only water." The man's gaze lingered on the well. "So you tell yourself. But listen longer. You'll hear it breathing, remembering. It does not give without asking something in return." Silence stretched between them. The wind rattled the dry grass. The stranger stood, adjusting his pack. "Take care, friend. Some wells feed the body. Others feed on the soul." With that, he walked on, vanishing into the horizon, leaving dust and unease in his wake. That night, the farmer sat by the fire, staring at the well. The words gnawed at him. He drank from it again, slower this time, tasting more than water. It seemed thicker, almost alive. And in his dream, he did not only hear laughter, he heard weeping. A voice whispered from the dark. Not cruel, not kind, just weary. Stay. The farmer woke with his heart hammering, throat dry despite the water he had drunk. He stared at the well as dawn broke, its shadow long across the dirt. For the first time, he wondered not what the well could give him, but what it wanted in return. The land began to change. Not overnight, not in sudden miracle, but in the slow, steady way a winter thaws into spring. Where dust once rose, green shoots lifted timid heads. The farmer's crops, once brittle as bone, now reached for the sun, their leaves trembling with life. Each morning he knelt, calloused hands brushing soil, marveling at what had seemed impossible only weeks before. Word spread. Neighbors who had turned their backs now came riding by, curious. They saw corn standing tall where none had grown in years. They saw beans curling up poles, blossoms ready to bear fruit. The farmer offered no boasts. He simply shared what the land gave him, and when they asked how, he pointed toward the well. Some crossed themselves. Others shook their heads, muttering about curses and bargains too costly. But there were those who returned with buckets, desperate for even a sip. The farmer, though hesitant, did not turn them away. He filled their pails, watching hope return to their eyes as they tasted what he had tasted, water that seemed to wake the soul itself. For the first time in many years, he was not pitied. He was respected. And with respect came something else, community. Neighbors began to gather again, bringing tools, trading seed, offering help where once there had been only silence. The ranch, once a deserted carcass of dreams, now pulsed faintly with life. Yet even as the land brightened, shadows lingered in the farmer's sleep. The voices grew stronger. The laughter of children was no longer faint. It rang clear, then cut off as if choked by unseen hands. The woman's song turned into a sob. He woke each time gasping, his body cold with sweat, though the desert night was warm. He told himself the dreams meant nothing. But in his heart, he knew the well was showing him more than water. It was showing a memory. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in copper, she came. A woman leading a tired horse, her dress plain, her hair tied back in a simple knot. She moved with quiet strength, though her eyes carried the weight of storms. She asked for water, her voice steady but edged with weariness. The farmer said nothing at first, only dipped the bucket and handed it to her. She drank, slowly, carefully. When she lowered the cup, her gaze softened, as though the water had eased more than thirst. "This place," she murmured. "I thought it dead." The farmer studied her, words slow to come. "So did I." She came again and again, sometimes for water, sometimes for seed, sometimes only to stand at the fence and rest. They spoke little, but each word mattered. She told him of her struggles, fields that gave nothing, neighbors who saw her only as a burden since her husband had gone. He listened, never judging, never pressing. In return, she listened to him, though he rarely spoke of his past. It was not romance that bloomed between them, not at first. It was something gentler, a recognition, two souls weathered by hardship, finding a kind of safety in silence shared. But not everyone looked kindly on this bond. Another man lingered in the edges of their story. A harsh man, broad-shouldered, with a voice like gravel. He mocked the farmer openly, calling him a fool for clinging to cursed water. Yet he eyed the well with hunger, the kind born not of thirst, but of greed. And he courted the woman with rough hands and careless words, offering promises that sounded more like threats. She kept her distance. She found no safety in him, no gentleness. Her steps always led back to the ranch, where the farmer worked quietly, where the well's water waited, where kindness lived in silence. But the farmer knew the well was not kindness. Not truly, for though the land thrived, though neighbors smiled, though the woman's presence softened the edges of his loneliness, the whispers in his dreams grew darker. He began to feel it when he drank, the weight of it, as if each drop carried memory, not his own. He tasted sorrow, tasted endings. Sometimes he thought he heard voices begging beneath the coolness on his tongue. And one night, the dream changed. No longer did he only see the family. He saw himself among them. He saw his own shadow bending toward the well, his hands cupped, his face hollowed by thirst. He saw himself vanish into the black mouth, leaving nothing behind but echoes. He woke with a cry, startling the woman who had fallen asleep by the fire nearby. She touched his arm, concern in her eyes, but he said nothing. He only looked at the well, its stones glimmering faintly in moonlight. The burden of its gift pressed heavy on him. Yet even knowing this, he could not turn away. For in the woman's smile, in the laughter of children returning to the settlement, in the green of his crops swaying under the sun, he saw something he had not seen in many years: hope. And if hope was born from water that carried shadows, then he wondered if perhaps that was a price he could bear. Still the well waited, patient, silent, watching. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world was caught between dream and waking, he thought he heard it whisper his name. The days grew brighter, yet the nights grew heavier. The well no longer whispered, it called. Each time the farmer drew water, he felt it pull at him, like a hand reaching from the depths. He drank and tasted not only coolness, but memory, sobs, laughter, voices broken off mid-song. The more the land thrived, the more the well demanded. Neighbors praised him. The settlement breathed again. The woman smiled, her presence like a lantern in a long, dark tunnel. Yet the farmer's eyes grew tired. The burden pressed heavier each night until he could bear it no longer. One evening, when the moon was high and the desert lay silver and still, he tied a rope around his waist, lit a lantern, and stood at the well's mouth. His heart thudded like a drum. The woman's voice carried behind him. "Don't," she said. Her tone was steady, but her hands trembled. "I need to know," he whispered. He lowered himself into the dark. The rope slid rough against his palms. Stone walls closed in around him, cool and damp. The air thickened, smelling of earth and something older, something that tasted like sorrow. His lantern swayed, light catching carvings on the stone. He paused, holding the glow steady. Figures etched into the walls. Hands outstretched, faces bent in prayer. Lines showing water flowing, but always from figures giving themselves to it. Bodies sinking, lives vanishing, streams flowing out. Each drawing was a story. Each story ended in sacrifice. The farmer's breath caught. The truth pressed against him as heavy as the stone. This was no gift. It was a vessel filled not by springs, but by lives poured into it. Every blessing had been bought by another's loss. The lantern flickered. The air thickened. A murmur rose around him. Voices, many voices, layered upon one another. They spoke not in anger, but in weariness. "Stay." The word echoed through his bones. The rope tugged above. He looked up, saw the faint ring of moonlight. The woman's face peered down, her hands tight on the rope, her voice breaking. "Come back." The farmer's chest tightened. He understood now. The well demanded payment, and it was his turn. If he let go, the land would thrive forever. The crops, the people, the settlement, all would live by his sacrifice. His name would fade, but his gift would endure. If he climbed out, the well would starve. The voices would wither into silence. The land might fail again, but he would live, not for himself, but for the chance to build something true, something earned, something shared with her. He closed his eyes. He thought of the years of hunger, of the mockery, of the silence of an empty house. He thought of her hand brushing his arm by the fire, the gentleness in her eyes. He thought of the way hope had bloomed, fragile but real. His fingers tightened on the rope. "I won't give you my life," he whispered into the dark. "I'll give you my strength. That's all I have to offer." The voices swelled, angry, pleading, sorrowful. The walls seemed to close in. But he climbed, hand over hand, every muscle straining, lantern banging against stone. The woman pulled, her arms burning, tears streaking her face. Together, they brought him back into the moonlight. He collapsed on the dirt, chest heaving, rope cuts burning his hands. She knelt beside him, clutching his shoulders as if to anchor him to the world. The well lay silent, its mouth black, its depth endless. The farmer rose, trembling but resolute. He lifted a heavy stone, then another, then another. She joined him. Together, they rolled stones over the mouth, sealing it shut. The voices faded beneath the weight, muffled, then silent. The desert night breathed again. The days that followed were not easy. The crops grew slower. The land resisted once more. The neighbors murmured, some angry, some fearful. The harsh man sneered, calling him a fool for closing the only gift worth having. But the farmer no longer listened. He worked, day after day, sweat soaking his shirt, hands cracked and bleeding. And she worked beside him, not because of miracles, but because she chose to. Together they bent to the soil. Together they coaxed life. Together they endured. And slowly the land responded, not with abundance beyond measure, but with enough. Enough to eat, enough to share, enough to remind them that hard work and love, not curses and bargains, are what keep life alive. The ranch changed again, not by the well's shadow, but by their hands, by neighbors who still believe in kindness, by laughter that returned, not as an echo from the past, but as something born fresh under the sun. The farmer no longer dreamed of voices. At night, he dreamed of tomorrow, and when the fire burned low, and she leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, he finally understood. Hope is not a gift given. It is a seed planted, tended, grown. The well had not given him life. It had only shown him what he already carried within. Sometimes, what we find in the deepest wells is not water at all. Sometimes it is only our own reflection, waiting for us to see the truth, that love, sacrifice, and steady kindness are the only treasures worth keeping. So, dear traveler by this fire, if this tale has stirred your heart, leave a word below. Tell us from where in this wide, wild world you are listening. And if you'd ride with us again through stories of dust and dream, don't forget to subscribe. These Wild West tales will be waiting, ready to warm your nights.